At this time, I'll call our meeting to order. I appreciate you being here this evening and know that we are being very cautious and we are following the directives that have been set forth as far as making sure we're safe. I do want to read something from Commissioner Marley. He is actually will not be here tonight because of his position as Emergency Management Director of Hope County. He says, due to the recent issues dealing with COVID-19, which you are aware of, I must give a presentation to the county commissioners at their meeting this evening. I have reviewed the agenda for tonight's Hope Mills Board of Commissioners meeting, and I have no issues with items that have been placed on the agenda. And he just asked for you to understand that in his role in Hope County, that it is important that he be there this evening. He did say that if that meeting gets over, that he will, because it was starting a little bit earlier than ours, that he will try to make it here. But I did want to read that first. Also, this evening, we were supposed to have Boy Scout Troop 771 here. They were going to be here to actually earn one of their badges and then to do the Pledge of Allegiance for us tonight. And we have rescheduled that to a later date because of concerns, again, for making sure that everyone's safe. At this time, I've asked Pastor Michael Mathis of Mission Fields Ministries to lead us in our invocation, which will be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance. If you will, all please rise.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, oh God, we stand now before you, and we thank you for your omnipresence. And God, we're forever calling on you in the name of Jesus. And we ask you now, Lord, wherever there's anything that would be displeasing to you in your sight, Lord, we ask for your forgiveness and refreshing right now in this hour. Oh God, and we come now praying for wisdom, that you'll continue to grant the board members wisdom to make decisions, especially in times like this, which would be for the betterment of Cumberland County, especially this great town of Hope Mills. God, we ask, Lord, that you'll continue to keep your loving arms around the mayor and her family. Not only her, God, but all of her staff, the board members, and everybody else, God, that continues to contribute to make the town of Hope Mills a great place and a safe place to live. Our first responders and everybody. Oh, Lord, and we ask you, God, not for that, but we are not only for that, but we also ask you, Lord, because our times are in your hands, and these times that we live in now, God, there's so much uncertainty. And Lord, we call on you. You have never failed us. And we ask you, God, to have mercy on America. But here in the state of North Carolina, in Fayetteville, we ask, God, that you would keep a hedge of protection around us. I'm familiar, and I'm sure that others are familiar, that in your word, God, you declare that we can trust you and that no pestilence or virus, these things, God, 1,000 people may fall by our right hand, but none of these things shall come upon us or our dwelling place. And I declare that in Jesus' name. We don't want to see anybody perish, God, but we pray now, Lord, that these times that we live in, God, the board members and those that are contributing to the important decisions of our country and this city and this town, God, would hear your voice. And we just put everything into your hands this evening in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. With our agenda tonight, I do have two items that will be moved from the new business to our consent agenda. And one is item A, which would be non-public hearing items, case number 20-029, consideration of the Hope Mills Museum C3 site plan review, Hope Mills zoning ordinance zone C3, acreage .11, located at 5554 Trade Street, submitted by the town of Hope Mills owner. And also a non-public hearing on item case number 20-030, consideration of the Public Safety Center O&I P site plan review, Hope Mills zoning ordinance zoned O&IP, acreage 10, located 5770 and 5776 and 5788 Rockfish Road, submitted by the Town of Hope Mills owner. And that both of these are, it's a formality for our town because these are both town site plans, and so it's not necessary to have a public hearing. And they become items H and I under our consent agenda. And it also, we did have a closed session scheduled this evening, requested by Commissioner Legg, and I think Commissioner Legg at this time has asked for that to be,
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to request that we table the consent agenda item till some of this stuff we're going through clears up, and with God's help, it'll happen sooner than later, and so we can gather more information.
okay?
You mean
So-
the closed session item?
Closed session item, right. So we have two items moved from our, moved to our consent agenda. One item that will be tabled until the next regular meeting, and there's a closed session that we will not do tonight. So with these changes, do I have someone do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda with the changes mentioned.
Okay, I have a motion to approve with changes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and seeing none opposed. The next we have, of course, on our agenda, if you have it before, you had a presentation, and those presentations will be made to the scout troop once we do have their training, and we do have them here at our meeting. Next on our agenda is public hearings. It's case P20-09. It's a rezoning of 3.45 plus or minus acres from C1 planned local business district to C2 planned service and retail, CZ conditional zoning for all allowed uses within the C2P district or to a more restrictive zoning district. It's located at 4107 South Main Street, and it's been submitted by Richard Allen Jr. and Joan Allen Johnson, owners, and Scott Brown on behalf of 4D Site Solutions. I'll turn it over at this time to Mr. McLaughlin.
Hello, Madam Mayor, board members. In the interest of time, I'll try to keep this presentation as brief as possible. As stated, this is case P20-09, which is a conditional zoning request. In terms of the background, it's a 3.45 acre tract. The address is 4107 South Main. It's currently zoned under the C1P district. There's an existing vacant commercial structure on site. There's a large residential area to the rear. The land use designation is currently set at low density residential. The proposal is for a 9,100 square foot Dollar General that proposes 37 parking spaces, and there's a 6-foot privacy fence in the rear. In terms of existing zoning, as stated, you can see a very large area, and the subject property is outlined in red. There's a very large area to the east, zoned under R10. There is a dentist office directly across the street and a CP property just below that, and a larger residential area to the northwest. There are some commercial properties to the south, and a large mixed-use development proposed along to the south as well. This is an area view. It gives you another view of the makeup of the surrounding area. And this is the existing land use. As such, the area, based on the in compliance with the zoning, the residential area has a single-family residential land use. There's a large apartment complex across Church Street, designated under your multifamily designation. The subject property has a commercial land use. The commercial area to the south, where the convenience store has a commercial land use. The doctor's office is considered office space. In terms of water and sewer is available to the subject property. This is your floodplain map. It does show that your floodway, your 100-year storm is to the south. Back to land use, even though I stated earlier that the subject property has a low density residential land use and it's not compatible with the request to C2P, there is a large area to the immediate west directly across the street that has a mixed use development land use designation. This is your proposed site plan. As you can see, egress is off of Main Street. Parking is in the front. You do have landscaping that does anchor the intersection of Church Street and Main Street. Detention is to the far, well, based on the site orientation, the detention will be to the south of the site. They do have a 6-foot privacy fence proposal on the rear. That is required based on the buffering requirements where you have a commercial property adjacent to residential zoning. And here are your site photographs. This is a view from South Main directly at the site. This is the existing commercial structure that's vacant. This is another view looking at the further southern portion of the site that doesn't currently have anything on it. This is a view standing on the property of the existing commercial structure. This is a view looking south along the South Main. Subject properties on the left side of your screen. This is a view of the cemetery across the street from the subject property. This is a view looking north along South Main. The subject property is on your right. And Planning Board did recommend approval of this request, and staff is recommending approval as well. Now, what you see here in terms of conditions, I wanted to make sure we're clear. When you have a conditional zoning request, there are conditions that the applicant will put in the application as self-imposed conditions. That's what you see here. So he's proposing, in terms of uses, retail and any use permitted under the C2P district, which is the requested district. Density, the property will be subdivided in 2 parcels. Parcel number 2 is listed as future development. Your setbacks will be the setbacks currently in place for the C2P requested district. Off-street parking will be conditioned to the 37 proposed parking spaces. He is honoring a 10-foot buffer, putting a 10-foot buffer with a 6-foot privacy fence. And in terms of lighting, he has exterior lighting limited to building and the parking lot. Now, what also happens with these requests, there are also conversations between the neighborhood and the developer. I have been facilitating some of those conversations between the community and the developer. There are some things that they agreed upon, but just one thing to make it clear to you guys, the only conditions that can be imposed in addition to these are the conditions that the board and the developer mutually agrees upon. So what will happen is, if there's someone from the community, they may have a list of conditions that they want. The developer may speak to the conditions he's willing to address. They actually have agreed for a few things, but I just want you guys to understand the conditions you see here are the conditions that he put in his application. Any other conditions that are negotiated between the neighborhood, who's probably going to speak, and the developer, those would have to be actually agreed upon by the developer, and you should put those in your motion. So if you do move forward with the approval, I would suggest that you add to your motion the conditions in the application and any mutually agreed upon conditions that the developer agreed upon this evening. And I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Will there be a required turn lane?
That is a DOT issue. I do know that DOT is proposing, it's one thing I was telling the community as well, from Cameron, which is north of this, all the way down to 301, DOT is proposing 2 lanes on each side with 3 roundabouts. I'm not aware of any specific requirements that they're requiring for this development. That would happen at permitting when they engage DOT for the DOT permit that's going to be required off of South Main Street.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor, I got
Yes, sir.
a couple.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the site map? I got a couple questions, Chancellor, so I'm just going to
Yeah,
throw
shoot.
them out. One of them is traffic related. This is a major gateway to Hope Mills when we're talking about traffic. Was there an impact study regarding traffic conducted?
If there was an impact study, it would have been required by DOT as approval, as a part of their approval process. So I'm not saying that there was or it wasn't.
Okay.
That wouldn't be anything that I could take into consideration for my approval. But there are instances where we may help facilitate a meeting with the developer and DOT, where we're made aware of some improvements that DOT is requesting. But as of now, I'm not aware of any requirements of any kind, including the impact study that DOT has requested. That doesn't mean that they won't, but with the proposed project they have, I'm not sure how or what diet that they will request from the developer, but that typically happens at permitting.
The other question I have, that does concern me. The other question I have, make sure I get them all. Why isn't retail C1P in our ordinance?
That's
That question stumps me because they're requesting C2P, and that opens up a lot of additional opportunities.
from my understanding, my way of answering that is more philosophical. C1P is considered your planned local business, and if you're talking about retail and you're talking about C2P, retail is pretty much anticipating a much larger development. So it's not necessarily something where I think there's something wrong with our ordinance. I think the philosophy that goes into the type of developments you see under a planned local business under C1P versus a C2P, your C2Ps allow everything all the way up to Walmart. So that's considered retail. So I'm thinking that your C2P district is meant to be in an area where you're having a transition into areas that would actually call for larger retail developments. It just so happens that Dollar General is a smaller retail development, but that's what I would think is the philosophy that goes into why retail is listed as an approved use under the C2P district as opposed to C1P.
But it is a C1P.
It's currently zoned C1P now.
But this technically is a C1P, yes?
The request is a C2P.
So when I look through the packet and I see C2P and all other areas under C2P that can be considered for the second property, I guess, would there be any zoning restrictions on what those may be?
It would just, in terms of zoning restrictions, are you looking for a specific type of zoning restriction you're talking about? Because ultimately,
Conditional.
it would be the same setbacks that would be enforced under C2P. It would be the same regulations that would apply to the Dollar General. What they're basically saying is they don't want to limit themselves to any of the uses that are allowed under C2P. The development controls that would apply to the Dollar General would apply to that vacant piece as well.
And that's my point, is that the C2P conditional would apply to both.
Yes, if you notice, they actually have the setbacks on both pieces. So when you see your 50-foot front and your 30-foot rear on the vacant piece, that is basically showing what those development controls under the C2P district would be for that vacant lot.
My concern is what's going to go in the vacant lot, I guess. Because if we zone the whole thing C2P, then that opens up another list of opportunities under C2P.
One thing I want to make very clear is that you are, and I don't want to suggest, but you're almost in a better situation under the current rezoning request under conditional zoning, because that actually brings this request to the board in a situation where it requires board approval and it allows for the conditions to be negotiated. If this does not move forward, they can walk right in the door and develop it under C1P right now with no involvement. Now, it would require site plan approval, but that burden of proof by the board would be much lower, and you're missing the ability to actually negotiate some of these conditions. So even though C2P appears to be something that would allow for a larger development, because of the way C2P, CZ conditional zoning is set up, you're actually in a much better position to kind of massage the development than you would be if they currently developed it under the existing commercial
But I
district.
can circle back to C1P because that's more restrictive.
It's more restrictive,
And that's my
but
point.
if it comes to you, you have no control over if there's something you want them to do that you don't like. You wouldn't have the authority to do that. It would come in as a site plan approval, and site plan approval is really the only burden of proof is if you meet the regulations in the district. So if there uses like a gas station or something like that that the neighborhood doesn't want that's in the C1P, we wouldn't have any ability to actually have any control over that. Now that doesn't mean that you accept anything. It just means that even though there's a request for rezoning, it's already zoned commercial. So if it was a residential request to commercial, that's a little different. I'm just letting you know they could develop this under the existing commercial district. Now, it would be different uses, but it still would be a
Correct.
commercial development.
So under C2P, would the board have guidance on what's going to go in the second lot that's vacant now?
Ye-
Under conditional zoning?
That's a tricky one because
That
I do
is.
think
That
that if you wanted to go in that direction with negotiating a condition on that second piece, again, a condition can only be enforced if it's mutually agreed upon. So if you wanted to limit the uses on that and the developer didn't agree to it, you could not enforce that as a condition.
Because currently the lot is to be determined. the vacant
Yes,
lot.
that's correct. And which is why I think they put in their conditions in the application, all uses allowable under the proposed district of C2P so that they can actually have more wiggle room on what they can attract to that site.
Well, that's a lot of different businesses that are allowed under C2P. 'Cause I went through
That's
it
correct.
today, and
That's correct.
yeah. See, and C1P is more restrictive. I guess where I'm going is, this is impacting a heavy residential area with a lot of traffic, and it's a gateway.
I would clarify when you say more restrictive, it is more restrictive in the type in terms of the size of uses, but there's still a significant
Correct.
amount of uses in the C1P that may not be that welcoming to a neighborhood as well. So I don't want people to think that if you just do it on the C1P, you have all these harmonious uses that are commercial in nature that may not pose any of the same threats that you're seeing now. I just want to make sure people understand that even though C1P is more restrictive, you still have a significant amount of uses. There are allowable uses in that particular district. But I just want to frame that just to make sure everybody's aware.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, any other questions?
I'd like to verify something.
Okay.
Chancellor, you said a while ago that the developer and the residents, you were more or less negotiating between the two of them.
Yes.
Do you feel that they were both in agreement?
I do think that, and I can't technically facilitate the conditions, but I do think with the request that I received from the community and the feedback I got from the developers, I will say that at least about a large, very large percentage of the requests made by the community were actually agreed upon by the developer.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
direct just a question at Ms. Brown, if I may. Are all your requirements being met, Ms. Brown, at this vacant lot?
So on the site, they have a storm pond listed on the right-hand side just before the creek. They've not submitted the actual plans, but their engineer does know what our requirements are, and typically he meets them. So I don't see any concern for why they wouldn't meet the town's minimum requirements.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How about the police and fire chief? Any problems?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Continue on.
One question I have, and I don't know if
Yes.
this is something that's important or not, but I know there's different types of Dollar General buildings. I know there's some that have been, I've seen that are the metal type buildings and some that are the brick type buildings. And so is there, with this site plan, is in that proposed building, do we know what type it's going to be?
Ironically, that was part of the discussion between the neighborhood. I think the neighborhood wanted that, and I think the developer agreed to brick along the front. But that's what I mean by there were some conversations.
Good. Okay, that was one of the things I had personally had noticed, that there
Yes.
are different types of
Yeah.
buildings. Okay. Any other comments or concerns? If not, you want to open the public hearing? All right, this time we'll open the public hearing, and for the public hearing, we'll start with anyone that has any reason that they would like to oppose this development. If you'll come to the microphone and give your name and address. So if anyone that is in opposition, if you would come at this time.
My name is Cindy Garrity. I live at 4109 Freedom Lane. And I wasn't privy to these talks with the contractor, because I have never been given anything by mail. I've had to have my neighbors tell me what's going on. And matter of fact, I do oppose this one because of the traffic. It is very difficult to get out of Church Street. And I go to Duke a lot because of my medical treatments. And to make a left there is absolutely ridiculous, because nobody will let you in. When there's an accident on Hope Mills Road and it's all backed up, nobody leaves a section for people to make a turn to get in or out of Church Street. And one thing I'd like to see is, this is probably gonna happen. I'm just saying I don't want it to, but I'd like to see a stoplight because of the traffic. And I don't understand why DOT isn't here to explain their issue about the traffic, because I personally think that they need to be here. Because you have a lot of kids, and it's a safety issue. Two, I'm not really crazy about Dollar Generals, because after a year or so, they look like a garage sale. Closed out on the front entrance. I mean, I'm not pleased with it. You know, because you've got a lot of, you got Dollar General, you got Family Dollar, so on and so forth, and you go into those buildings and the business, and it's not clean, it's not kept nice, and I live in an area. I want my area to look nice. I'm really concerned about the entrance and exit. Is there going to be an entrance from Church Street, or is it going to be an entrance from Hope Mills Road? Where's the exit? You know, there's a lot of things that has to be studied on this for me to be okayed with this, and I'm not okay with this, especially with the as far as the traffic. That is the big concern right there, and I'd like to see an impact study done on that traffic before we even go any further. And like I said, DOT needed to be here, and I don't understand why they weren't, so that they can answer our questions, and like the questions that you had, sir. Other than that, I'm just really opposed to it. I do know that something's going to go in, but you know, Hope Mills is small, and we've got 2 buildings that are going to be vacant pretty soon, and both of them are gas stations. Look how long it took for something to go into Bilo. You know, it took years for something to go into Bilo. What are we going to do with all these other empty buildings? To me, it would be more advantageous to refurbish an existing building than maybe to build a new one right there. Because for some reason, I think there's going to be a real big issue with the traffic and all that stuff on that corner. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Okay, anyone in favor of this development?
I will not say that I'm in favor of it, that my husband and myself are in favor of it. But we're the ones that's been asking for certain conditions to be made, because it's right behind our property. Our
You
prop-
need name and address. Name and
Oh, I'm
address.
sorry. I'm Beth Barden and my husband Tom Barden, and we live at 4104 Millbridge Road,
Okay.
which is what I was saying, it's right behind our lot and their lot. Can you hear me? I don't want to talk too much. About the rezoning, maybe this would help your question. This is what I understood. That zoned at C1P, anybody can come in there and put anything in at the C1P that it's at now. But if they rezone it to the C2P, and this is what I learned down at the county meeting, was at the C2P, that you have a more restrictive zoning district, where, like Mr. McLaughlin said, we can make requests or ask for certain conditions and stuff there. But, and from what I understand, at the C1P, anybody can come in, gas stations, grocery stores, or anything can come in and develop there at what it's at now. But if it's C2P, what we understood is we can make these, ask for certain conditions, and that it's a more restricted zoning district. That's what I understood, my understanding from going to the zoning board at the county. I'm sorry, I meant to begin with Madam Mayor and board members. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. We understood that we can request certain conditions for the Dollar General, which are, and they have responded to some of these conditions that we've asked. Through Mr. McLaughlin, we sent some requests. I'm going to tell you what we requested and then what we heard from them on some of these. We asked them to upgrade the building to brick, full brick, so it would look nice. I mean, you're talking about, this is our town and this is Main Street. It's not down here on Main Street, but it's, still South Main. And we'd like for it to look nice, I guess, because we're right behind it too. And I have seen the ones that are all brick, or just about all brick. There's one on Ramsey Street, I just saw it the other day, and it looks really nice. And I know at least 3 of the sides are brick, and they have it fixed real nice. They responded that it will only be brick on the front. That was our response from them for that one. Then we asked for a 7-foot privacy fence as a buffer. We maybe should have asked for an 8-foot across the back of, we are, where there's, I can't read this thing. We're in lot 1 and 2, right behind them. Our property meets right up to them. And we asked for the 7-foot privacy fence as a buffer. And they responded that the fence will be 6 foot, but they will add the drought-hardy landscaping. I guess it's big old bush things behind there. And we kind of agreed to that. But then I thought about it, and I'm asking that if those trees die, because they do die some, that they would be that Dollar General would be responsible for removing them, so they wouldn't be ugly, big old bushes back there. Then we asked, and this was mentioned down at the county meeting, that we asked that their trash pickup be between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. The back of our house is, you're going to be able to hear stuff. And if we're in bed, you're going to hear them come if they come at crazy hours. But they responded that they couldn't agree to that. So I sent in another request that the trash pickup be between the store hours, which we were told was their store hours would be between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. That the trash pickup would be then. Then another concern request that we sent in was that they install down lighting on their property. And their response was they were agreeable for that. I saw somewhere where they were talking about the lighting, but I didn't see where it said that down lighting, so it's not shining everywhere. then we ask that they keep a well-cleaned property meeting our town standards that we have here in town. And they agreed to that. Now, I don't know how, if it becomes looking bad, like she was talking about, like a yard sale place or something, if something can be done about it or not through the town. Then we requested that they develop a stormwater drainage system so that there will not be rainwater runoff from the back of their property into our property. And I'd forgotten when I requested that they were going to build that stormwater, the retention pond back there. I know when I heard that at that meeting, I asked them if they were going to put a fence around that retention pond. The apartments across Church Street from us, from our property, has a nice fence around it that we were against those apartments, but they are keeping them up very well. And I think it's a safety thing to have some kind of fence around that pond, because in the neighborhood there are children that could go back there and play around and want to make sure it's safe. Let me see what I said around it. They said that the water from their store and parking lot will be directed to that basin, to the pond thing. And then they didn't really, they said that the runoff from the grassy area will be the current drainage pattern. And I don't know that there's any current drainage pattern there. Our grass runs into that grass, and I don't think they have any of the stormwater drainage things to the street like we do in our neighborhood. So that's still a concern. And our concern is that there is, well, that's what I was just saying, no drainage pattern there, that they should consider putting in some type of drains in that area. Our main concern was about that was, I don't know if they were going to put dirt in there and build it up. And if they did that, then it's going to, well, you know how we've been flooding and stuff, and it would flood into our yard. But if they maybe would do something about drains, I don't know if they're going to build it up or what. And then, this hasn't been brought up, but I'm going to ask them if they know that, and I pulled it out for some reason. That was in my safe, and looked at when we bought the house. And behind our property, there's supposed to be, and I don't know if you're supposed to say 10 foot or 10 feet, 10-foot easement between the two properties. And I didn't know if they were aware of that or not. So that would put it a little bit from touching our property especially. Then I was, understood that maybe the store was going to be a 34-foot in from their property line. And like I said, I'm not against it because I don't want something crazy going in there, because those people are going to sell it. And this restrictive zoning, from what I understand, would be a better thing for us in our neighborhood. And we don't have, I think, anybody else really here from the neighborhood, but they were told about these things. Something else I was going to say. We don't want anything in there. That ugly building they showed a while ago, it's been there. We've been in that house. Come June, we'll be in that house for 42 years. And there's been a few things in it that's not been bothersome or anything. And it looks ugly, but when you compare it to something like Dollar General or other stores and things going in there, there's nothing going on there. So it's okay. And I just hope the town, with what's going to be going on South Main, will make sure that things are kept nice and look good like it is up on North Main.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Yes. Okay, we got some.
Sure about this. So good evening. My name's Thomas Neville. I'm a local attorney here in Fayetteville, not in Hope Mills. I think I've only been before y'all one time. It's a long time ago, so I'm not sure if I've seen any really familiar faces, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I'd like to discuss some of the concerns and then the concessions that we've agreed to, and then possibly some of those that cause us a little bit of heartache. It's very important for us, obviously, that you do vote to approve this. So if you do have concerns, we would appreciate an open, honest, and frank discussion of that. And we'll respond to every question that you have. Also, I do have Scott Brown with me, the engineer, and Zach Ivy, who's the representative for General Dollar, and to respond or to make decisions as to things you may request or offer. Okay, so whenever I look at a site, and I'll give a very brief rendition of what I gave before the planning board. To me, it always comes down to really, you can boil it all down to one question: what happens if you approve, or what happens if you don't approve? What happens tomorrow and the years to come? So I go out to a site and I look at it always with that in mind. So I'm looking at, what is the current condition? What's going on now? What happens if nothing changes? Or what happens if you do vote to approve? And in this instance, I would say that you should vote to approve with the conditions or concessions that we're going to agree to, because as this lady spoke here, I'm sorry, Ms. Brown, Ms. Martin, it's a known. Otherwise, you're faced with an unknown, which to me is more dangerous in this situation. So if you do vote to approve, it's a known in that there's a site plan, and then there's concessions that we're going to agree to. So that's what happens if you accept it. If you don't accept it, then we're left with where we are right now, which is an old dilapidated building that is somewhat of an eyesore. So it's going to stay there for some period of time. It's going to continue to be an eyesore to the thoroughfare coming into Hope Mills, or the property is going to be sold and something under C1P will go in there. And I think this is mainly what the lady was speaking to. I think there's been some communications lost as to the difference between C1P and C2P. But I think what she took away from the planning board specifically was these are all the things that can go under C1P. If nothing changes, the owner can sell the property and C1P can go in there. In this instance, because C2P has these conditions, you know what you're going to get. And I think that was the real communication that came out of the meeting or the hearing. So the one thing, if you look at the list between C1P and C2P, there's actually not a whole lot of difference. There's only a few things that go under C2P that do not exist under C1P. One of the things that does exist under C1P, which I think is likely, is a convenience store complete with fuel pumps and car wash, with no additional buffering or conditions that we're willing to agree to. That can happen tomorrow. And I think that is if I looked at my crystal ball, that's a likely possibility. And all those DOT concerns about traffic and all that's still there. DOT makes its decisions. And in fact, I think they would have more traffic. You could have a small grocery store there, clubs, daycares, auto pot stores. Any of these things can go in there now without any additional conditions. So again, if you don't pass this, either you stay with the dilapidated store and nothing happens other than that, or eventually it's sold and one of these other conditions comes in without any of these concessions that we're going to agree to. So the known is this site plan plus these are the concessions that we've agreed to. And as I've said, I've got Mr. Ivy here, so he's the owner's representative. So if I say something that's incorrect, he needs to stand up and say something really quickly. Otherwise, this is what we're willing to agree to. So we will agree to a brick front on the store, and when I say that, that is up to 10 feet in brick in the front of the store, and also a 6-foot solid privacy fence that runs the back of the property. In addition to that, we would have the drought-hardy landscape buffer, which would probably be a Leland cypress of that nature. And certainly, if they die, we'll agree to remove them. That goes without saying. We are trying really hard to listen to the neighbors and to respond to them. So we would agree to those things. We also would agree to what they call down lighting or dark sky friendly lighting, which is what I believe that you're requesting. So that's the type of lighting that we would agree to. As to the drainage issues, it's my understanding that we agree to the request, but that does get a little bit technical. So we do have Mr. Brown here if necessary to respond from an engineer standpoint. We would install, as depicted in the site plan, the storm pond. It's my understanding that once the grading is completed, yes, the water would flow naturally to that point. So, and didn't really understand your concern to begin with. I did now that she spoke, because typically buildings do go up on paths, and you certainly don't want water running into your property because of the pad and pavement and things such as that. So I certainly understand what she's requesting, and it certainly is reasonable. I think Mr. Brown can speak to that being addressed, and certainly we would address that. We would agree to have garbage, trash, whatnot removed during business hours. The main reason why we didn't agree to more is because we don't control that. Typically, trash is picked up during off hours, off rush hours, but again, that's not within my client's control. So we can't say it'll be between at a specific time frame. We can request it, but that's not for us to determine at what time the trash is picked up. That's why we said during office hours, store hours. So I think I've covered everything that we're going to agree to. Again, we're more than happy to have a discussion as to other concessions if the board thinks they're important. We'll respond to those. I did think that some of the points that were made by the lady, and I apologize, I don't remember her name, in opposition, I think are very telling. One, it is a thoroughfare, and you do need to, I would submit to you that you need to address how your thoroughfare looks. I do believe that the dilapidated store that's there is not an appealing opening to a thoroughfare. The traffic with C1P is going to be there. We can't really affect or lessen the traffic on that road. And what I mean by that is, if at 8:30 in the morning you can't make a left-hand turn right now, well, you're not going to make a left-hand turn no matter what, unless DOT comes in and requires some of the things that have been discussed. It has nothing to do with what we actually put in there or not. That's a set condition or a set situation. The lady also said something's going to go in there. And that's my whole point. Something is going to go in there one day, and the neighbors in the community is in a much better position if they can control what goes in there versus being left to just whatever C1P can do without any restrictions at all. And then she also spoke as to the.
You're referring to me, my name is Cindy.
Cindy?
Yes, Miss Cindy.
And then Miss Cindy said, there's a number of abandoned buildings, and that's certainly true. That occurs everywhere. So what you don't want is the dilapidated building that's there now and remains there. The idea is to make the best use of the property. So for what it's worth, I live out in the rural area. I live in Linden, and I live across from an old gas station that has no restrictions on it whatsoever. And they put up the lighting they wanted to put up, which I then had to go plant a bunch of trees because it shines into my windows. And they have no buffering. because that's all they have to do. Now, this county, which is different. But my point is, again, this is a known with these conditions, and we certainly are respectful of the request of the neighborhood. And we're trying to be a good neighbor in meeting these things. So again, we would request that you do approve the C2P with these conditions and with the concessions that we've agreed to. And again, Mr. Ivy is here on behalf of Dollar General, and Mr. Brown is also here. Engineer, if you have any questions.
One question I have, and
Yes, ma'am.
that's just because on the site plan, the fencing and the drought-resistant plants, looks like they're just gonna go behind the Dollar General, so that the other piece of property that is there, it doesn't show that there's gonna be, the fencing on down. Will the fencing go across both pieces of property? Otherwise, there's gonna be that, the possibility that whatever comes next, would they do the same as far as putting up that privacy fence and that, that drought-resistant trees or whatever?
I'll let Mr. Ivy speak to that, but I would think, I would assume, and I don't know, that the neighbors would rather look at a vacant lot without a fence than one with a fence, but I don't know if that's the case. That's a question.
I'm doing the what ifs, it changes, whatever else comes there, if it comes there, I'm sure they're gonna want the same types of things.
So
Yes, sir.
I'll answer that. My name is Zach Ivy. I work at Par 5 Development Group, who is the developer
Okay.
and builder of this store. As of right now, there are no plans to develop that other remnant parcel. But if we were to develop that remnant parcel, yes, we would be, putting the fence there as well. So yes, that is something, and as well as the landscaping. If we were to develop that in the future, yes, we would be putting that fence and landscaping as well.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Just a small comment, if I may. I think as the traffic got bad on Church Street and Hope Mills Road, there is a back way out of there, by going the other way out Church Street. So it's not like you're trapped in there. My daughter lived there at Freedom and Church, so I got to be very familiar with the ins and outs of how to get out of there and when to get in and out of there. But there is like I said, a back way out of there if need be. But I certainly appreciate these people's concerns about having development to move in next to them. But I found in the past that these kind of businesses are probably the best kind of business that you can get for a neighbor. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And Mayor,
Yes?
I just have one question. Ms. Barden mentioned the fact about a 10-foot easement. I didn't understand exactly, is that from her property?
So the Scott can talk to this from the survey.
Scott Brown and the engineer surveyor for the piece of property. There's actually a 20-foot easement.
Oh, there is?
Yes, ma'am. 10 foot of it is on the existing neighborhood side, and 10 foot of it is on the existing C1P side. So it makes a total of 20 foot, and it's a 20-foot utility strip that is centered on that back common property line. And it is shown on that site plan, or on my site plan. It looks like it's not labeled on that one, but it is shown and labeled on the drawings that we have. And it runs, like I said, it runs right along that fence, and where we're showing the 6-foot privacy fence is on the outside edge of the 10-foot strip. So that 10-foot buffer that we're talking about providing is already a buffer there with the 10-foot utility strip. We're going on the outside of that and putting the fence and coming just on the inside of it and planting a solid row of screenery, probably Leland cypress. They grow fast, they grow big. That was screen the store. And so it is there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
My comment is just, I'm not crazy about the idea, but I would rather have some control of what is going on the property than not having any control at all.
Okay. Yes, sir. At this time, do I have a motion to close public hearing?
Motion closed.
Have a
Second.
motion to close in a second, so we'll close public hearing. I'll turn it back over to Mr. McLaughlin.
One thing I want to clarify based on testimony as well. DOT is one of the agencies that receives the request for comments from the county in the beginning of these processes, which means that they have a completely separate process. So if there is what they call road diets that they require with respect to stoplights, turn lanes, decel lanes, things of that nature, those will be things that would be enforced through their driveway permit process that we don't have the authority to consider. What you have under consideration for you tonight is really the request tied to zoning. But I don't want anybody to think that the developer has or we have the authority to require roadway improvements through our process. There's a separate process that those things will be addressed. I do think also with the medians and the roundabouts, the philosophy behind those is to actually reduce fatalities. So I do think that with the proposed improvements that DOT has, they're probably trying to address some of those traffic issues that exist in this area. With respect to the stormwater, I do know that the stormwater regulations do not allow for runoff on adjacent properties. So in order to meet their stormwater requirements, they are going to have to ensure that all water that's produced on that site have to be contained and addressed on that property. With respect to the easement, I think they just spoke to that as well. I'd also like to point out that the building is about 32.7 feet from the property line. The rear yard setback is 30, so you still have a significant amount of space between that building and where that property line and that fence will be. That's it for
Madam
me.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
thanks, Chancellor, for clearing that up. So, do we have the ability to request an impact study because of traffic?
Not through the zoning process. I do think there are thresholds with DOT that trigger traffic impact studies outright, but I do not know if Dollar General is big enough of a development that would require that. Properties like development like Lowe's, when they came in, that's something that's so massive. If you notice, they had to put in a traffic light, they had to put in decel lanes. So that threshold is meant to apply based on the size of the development. I don't know exactly what that threshold is, but I'm not aware if Dollar General hit that threshold. But if it was required, it would be required through that process of their driveway permit that they have to get from DOT. Now they're required to get the approval of all outside agencies before we issue a CO. So their building permit process and their certificate of occupancy requires that they have DOT approval. So if that is something that DOT would request, they have to get that approval before we issue the CO.
There it is, Chancellor. There it is, right there. There it comes out. See, my concern, and I appreciate what the attorney said too, sir, because I go to every property that comes before this board for a zoning, and I look at it too. I look at it for the fit. What I mean by fit is I look at it for the zoning fit for the neighborhood of the existing property that's there. I park in that lot and I look at the cars that's out there on that road. And I look at the cars that's coming in and out of Church Street and how it's going to impact those neighborhoods. That's what I look at. I take away the retail piece or even what the name of the retail piece business would be and look at how it impacts that particular neighborhood. And that's the reason I asked about the traffic, because that is a concern to me. And it should be to you guys, of the business owner. But that's all I have, Mayor.
Mayor Warner.
Can I respond? And I know that the plan from after they make the changes at Parkton Road, I know that the plan is to come on up with the 4 lanes to Cameron.
Yes.
Medians in the road so that you can only make a right turn out and you'll have to go up and turn around and come back
come
down.
back, yeah.
I know that that's in
The
the
science
foreseeable
behind that,
future.
yeah.
And I also know that just like we've been through with getting a driveway permit, that in order to get that permit, DOT is going to they're going to have to jump through the same hoops that we've jumped through. So I don't think that the DOT issue and the traffic issue, I think it's going to come with that driveway permit.
That's correct.
And I think it's also gonna come with what plans are already there for that
That's
strip
correct.
of land, because they've already got a plan from Cameron to the Parkton Road.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, that DOT approval process, they have to get that approval before they did the final sign off from us as well. So there's still a system of checks and balances in place.
Okay.
Mayor. Chancellor, does this section of Hope Mills Road, is that gonna be involved in the new island down the middle of the road? Or is it just gonna be north?
Yes. And one thing I did explain to the neighborhood, this whole entire area is going to look completely different. You have the roadway improvements from DOT. You have right at Parkton. One of the reasons why that area is being cleared but hadn't been developed yet is because DOT is realigning the entire intersection of Parkton and South Main to run through what is a 95-acre mixed-use development that has already been approved. They just hadn't moved forward. That's just south of here. So that entire area is going to look a little different. But I was just letting the community know that the controls you have under the conditional zoning, they do have a seat at the table to help maybe negotiate some of those conditions they were able to talk through with the developer.
Can I make a motion to
Yeah.
approve?
One other question, does this fall under, do they have to provide a sidewalk?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because it's not in the, I don't see it in the drawing, in the site plan.
No, that is required. It's
Okay.
new construction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
All right, then you'll need to make the motion and add all the conditions to that motion.
Okay.
So the motion, have you
Now-
got,
I do have them written, and correct me if I step any to the left or the right. What I understood the conversation to be was the building will have a brick front. Privacy fence will be 6 feet with brick front up to 10 feet. There'll be a 6-foot privacy fence along the rear property line with drought hardy landscaping that will be replaced if they die. Trash pickup will be during store hours. Dark sky friendly downward facing lights will be installed, and the property will be maintained in a clean manner. We can enforce that through code enforcement, but that's what I understood the conditions to be that both parties agreed to. So what the mayor was saying is when you make your motion that's in your packets, after you read motion C, I would just suggest including the conditions in the application and the agreed upon conditions that were negotiated by the community. And a partridge and a pear
Okay, so
tree.
you want to read the motion? Okay. In case P 20-09, the Town of Hope Mills Board of Commissioners vote to approve rezoning from C1P Planned Local Business District to C2P Planned Service and Retail CZ Conditional Zoning for all allowed uses within the C2P district and find. A, the approval of this amendment is to the adoption to adopt current Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan 2014 map, and that the Board of Commissioners should not require any additional request or application to said map for this request. B, the following change in conditions was considered in amending the zoning ordinance, zoning map, to meet the development needs of the community. The parcel is currently served by public water and sewer and is adjacent to the mixed-use development designation, which would allow for light commercial uses. And C, the rezoning approval is reasonable and in the public interest, and because the subject property is along a heavily trafficked thoroughfare that would not be feasible for residential lots as to desire by the low-density residential designation. And also on this, I'd like to include the items that you had already listed.
Application, condition application, and then agreed upon from the neighborhood. That's correct.
Would that be all?
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
Second that.
we have a motion that's quite lengthy. Do we have a second for that
second
motion?
that.
Have a second for that motion. Any other discussion or any comments in reference to this? If not, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
right.
Thank you. And thank you, sir. And next, we have public comments, and we didn't have anyone sign up for public comments, so now we'll move to consent agenda. Our consent agenda has added to it the two items that would become H and I, and those are the ones, the non-public hearings in reference to site plans. And if there's anything else that you'd like to add, or, to move to new business, we can do so. If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with those two additions?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed, thank you. Next, under new business, there is no new business. It's gone. Next, we have our manager's report, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Board of Commissioners, I only have a couple real quick things, additions to my manager's report. Parks and Rec staff has completed the 2020 general application for the Community Built Grant with Kaboom, and we are awaiting a response. On Friday, a subcommittee of the overall Gateway Study Group that was formed to create a mission statement for the study met to brainstorm and develop and work on developing the statement. The meeting was a success, and the official mission statement for the Town of Hope Mills Gateway Study is proposed as follows. Quote, to develop a gateway plan for future harmonious growth in the greater Hope Mills community, promoting vibrant economic development to maximize opportunities that enrich arts, culture, diversity, and quality of life, unquote. And training, planning and economic development staff attended a 2-day training in Chapel Hill recently with UNC School of Government for its Community Development Academy. The training included topics from land banking, creative financing for community development projects, and low-income tax credit projects. Planning and Economic Development staff has conducted final site approvals on the Circle K located along Chickenfoot Road and Biscuitville located off North Main Street in anticipation of the issuance of their certificates of occupancy. Plan review staff has met with developers of a vacant site beside Sonic on North Main Street. As you may recall, for some time the site has been cleared with fill dirt being transported from other sites developed by Mr. Riddle. Plan review staff conducted a sketch plan review meeting where they were presented with a preliminary layout of the development of the entire site. There are potentially 5 buildings that will be constructed on site, with 3 of them being a proposed Fit for Life, an Aldi's, and a Popeyes. There is no current timetable for the development. And that is all that I have to add to my manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have, of course, the committee meetings that were scheduled have been all canceled. We also have canceled the Easter in Hope Mills, Easter with the Easter Bunny, and that perhaps has been canceled. It would also mean that our opening day has been canceled. And right now, I'm imagining that, have we also canceled the April 18th litter sweep, or is that, had canceled that yet?
That's
Okay.
probably something, it's a very fluid situation.
Okay.
Things are gonna change from day to day.
So just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
The Mayor's Youth Leadership Committee was supposed to meet this evening, and they were to have brought their PSAs, that they've, public service announcements that they've done for the litter sweep. I did ask them to send them to me and to Mr. McLaughlin so that if in time we know we're going to move forward, then we can use those. But they've done a great job. The 3 high schools all have done announcements about making Hope Mills beautiful, and they've gotten very involved in this. I did attend today's press conference with the Cumming County, the CEO of Cape Fear Valley Hospital and the health department, and Mayor Mitch Coleman. They did invite all the mayors there, and from that we got basically what the county's doing, and also just an update of information. It was very informative, and I was very thankful that they included Hope Mills. And of course, our town manager and our EMS were involved in a phone conference today also. So we've done a great thing, I think, in Cumming County, is keeping everybody informed as we move forward. And like Ms. Adams said, this is very fluid, and we'll know from day to day as far as what we have to do to meet the demands. Next, we have staff comments. None. All right, official comments. Do we have any official comments?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I may, first of all, I want to congratulate Melissa and the staff, our department heads, for taking action, moving forward with the cancelization. Is that a word? Of the programs that we've had to deal with. All of you know I'm a big youth guy. I love youth gatherings, but this is one time that I feel like the right decision was made, and I support that. As I've said before, we cannot put a price tag on the life of anyone, especially a child. So it's not worth the chance that may be, no matter how small it is, of someone having something to disrupt their life. So, again, thanks to each and every one of you, from top to bottom. And I think that this board is doing an outstanding job by supporting our staff and our town manager and our attorney. Don't want to leave you out, Dan. So, I want to, we just mentioned Biscuitville and Chick-fil-A. Probably by the time we have another meeting, they may be open. Chancellor can tell us that more than I can, but I know they're getting close. When you see the signs going up and it's already been stocked with stuff, we can have breakfast again somewhere else besides our old places. I don't know how those businesses are going to affect our mom and pop businesses that we have now, but there's enough for everybody. Just scatter out. We don't have such a big chance of catching a virus. So I was at the lake this weekend and it was packed. I was kind of leery about going when I saw all the cars. I said, well, I'll just stay off to the side, and I pretty much did. I stayed off to the side and watched people fishing and people canoeing, kayaking, and all that, you know. So it was good to see them using the property. That's what we meant it for to start with. It just took us so long to get it back to where it's functional again. It's really nice to have. It looks funny looking out here and seeing all these empty seats. Roger's faithful. He's always here. He's here again. So thank everyone for coming out and attending tonight's meeting on the conditions that we have to meet in. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Bellflowers, anything?
Like Commissioner Legg, about the lake, I was at the golf course over the past couple weekends. Sunday, there was 28 cars in that parking lot. Saturday, there were 26. The weekend before that was about the same, 24, I think, on one day. So the parking lot is filling up, and there's a tremendous amount of people that's using the trail for different activities. One question I hear every day, I'm just going to ask it. When is the ribbon cutting for the Chick-fil-A and Biscuitville? Do we know?
I don't think we know that
We
yet.
don't know yet.
Okay.
No.
I'm asked that
Send it
almost
out as soon as we
every
know.
day.
Yeah, it's,
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll be there to help with it. I'm gonna give me a biscuit.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem?
The same question. My daughter rides by Chick-fil-A and asks, what is it going to open
Every
up? And in light of what's going on with COVID-19, just telling everybody to be safe, take precautions, and heed the advice of the professionals.
Madam Mayor?
yes, sir.
Madam, one more thing.
Okay.
Lamarco's done left, hasn't he? I'm getting a lot of questions about refunds on registrations. And I try to explain that the season hasn't been canceled yet,
Right,
and that we'll work on that when the time comes.
right,
That's the only thing I know to say.
right.
So thank you.
One thing I wanted to bring up because, and I, not to rain on Chancellor's parade, Mr. McLaughlin's parade, but our alms house, if we can focus on getting what they need for the kids' backpacks. I know we're trying to do a county-wide event, and my concern is that we need to bring it down just to Hope Mills. They provide an awful lot of food to children on the weekends, and I know with they're going to be limited in their resources, especially because I'll use our church as an example. Our church is not having services or anything for 2 weeks, and our church provides a lot of the necessary things. So I hope that our community, we can get them to rally and get what's needed. And I think the main things that are needed are those types of food items that are easy for them to get open without a can opener. They do have a list. So I just encourage, if there's any way the town can encourage too, because that is an identified group. You know who they are, and you know that they're going to be hurting because they not only depend on breakfast and lunch at school, but they depend on what's been provided for the weekends too. All righty. Saying that, anything else for the good? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Anybody else want to do it?
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. See you all. Go home and be safe.